Okay. Good morning, everybody, or good evening, wherever it is, however it is we're in your part of the world. And welcome to the CentOS Automotive SIG meeting for February 2nd. We did not have a meeting in January, and I was not present at the one in December. I appreciate Ian and I think Pierre. I'm not sure exactly who ran that one, but I
It was a
want
team effort.
team. Well, that's good. That's good. It's good to have a community effort. So let's go ahead and dive in because we have a lot to cover, particularly in the technical status. I made a brief agenda. If anybody has any desire to add to this, please just drop a note in the chat. Keep an eye on that. If you have any agenda items that you would like to add. Um, I do want to make sure that since this is the first meeting of the year, we go over the goals that we had last year and kind of determine how we did. And maybe set some goals for 2022. Um, and I do want to make sure that we discuss the future meeting schedule because it does seem to kind of be a perpetual thorn in our side that we don't really have a set meeting time because there isn't a single time where everybody is available. Uh, and hopefully we can get that worked out. So what I'd like to do first is just launch into the technical status update because that I think is going to be the most interesting for everybody. And Pierre, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Jeffro. As you may have followed from the weekly newsletter that we're trying to send on a weekly basis to the Automotive SIG. So if you've followed them, there will probably be a little new. But to come back to where we were before the end of the year break, the place where we mostly work is the Automotive SIG repo on GitLab. So gitlab.com/automotive/automotive SIG. This is where we're building some of our toolings, but also where we are hosting our sample image definitions. You can find instruction on how to build these images on sigs.centos.org/automotive, and you have the generic documentation there, but then you have a page that's specific to building these images. We have a CI pipeline that is work in progress. It's actually it is actually running. We still have some quirks here and there, but it is present. If you look at merge requests that are in this GitLab project, you will see a number of tests coming back. It tries to create a YUM repository, then it tries to use that YUM repository to build images, and it lets you know how well it did. We've moved from CentOS 8 to CentOS 9 some time ago now. So all the sample images you'll find on the repository here are all CS9 based. As part of the CI pipeline, we're trying to get some testing done. Currently, a lot of them are, we have some places that are placeholders. So if you look at some of the merge requests, you may see something relative to FUSA quality gate. This is, for example, one of the placeholder that we have for the pipeline. There is no actual test being done yet, but we are building the infrastructure to allow us to have some tests. We, in the similar way, we are working on having downloadable images. So something where you don't have to manually build the images. You can just grab one from server, flash it on your SD card, get it to boot on your Raspberry Pi, or load it onto like a KVM or QEMU, whichever format you desire. We have actually, in the same vein, we have now sample images with different types. So we used to have QKO2 images, which are usable with QEMU, with KVM, but we also have what is it? Yeah, .img file, which you can flash on your SD card. Nowadays, you can also get OCI containers. So you're able to look at, so we have a developer environment image, and you can build it as an OCI tarball, and then you can just podman import that archive into on your machine, and you'll get a ready-to-use container with all the pre-installed, the prerequisite installed for, and reading the kernel source RPM. That's one of the target that we were looking at, as well as actually building images, although this is not the best example because you can't actually build images within a container yet. We have other means to do that. which are mentioned in the documentation we just spoke about. You can get a tarball, just a tarball of the root file system. You can get an OS3 repository if you've been playing with OS3s, then it allows you to build a repo for the next update of your image. All of this is present in the make help. So if you download the Automotive SIG repo, if you clone it, sorry, you go to the OS build manifest folder and you just type make help, and you'll have all the instructions using this make file, which is actually also something new since the last meeting. We have wrapped up all the comments that we had into an easy to use make file, which explains a number of options that are available. Next slide. So in addition to the sample images, we also have a few RPMs that have been created, which are specific to the Automotive SIG. One of them is the kernel auto, which has actually been renamed to kernel automotive, simply because apparently when kernel auto sounded too much like an automated kernel or something that builds automatically, and so people had assumptions with kernel auto that were not matched with what actually is the kernel auto. So it was renamed to kernel automotive. It has the real-time patches merge. It is built for AR64, so that's something which is new. The idea is to have this kernel tree and RPM be tweaked for the automotive use case. For example, it has some patches have been merged there for better support of the Raspberry Pi 4, which are not present in the Rail kernel or the CentOS Stream kernel. And the idea is, of course, to enable more hardware as we progress and find new hardwares to enable in there. So overall, we're progressing. We do need and want, receive more input. If you have not looked into that, please do have a look. If you do have comments, if you do see things that are missing or see things that you would like to see different, then do let us know, and we'll be happy to accommodate.
Specifically, I'd like to hear people's thoughts on various configs. Like, I'd really like to hear if somebody says, "Oh, you're missing my favorite device."
Mm-hmm.
We've made a good what we thought was a good stab at what the configs should be, but we know they're not all there. So don't be shy about letting us know that. It's funny. I'm sitting here in an open source meeting saying, "Don't be shy." But anyway, please. I guess the solicitation is let's take a look at the kernel config and make sure it meets your needs. And if it doesn't, we'll try and adjust.
I would say that probably applies to packages as well, and anything else that you might run across within this repo.
I apologize, Jeffro. I forgot that there's something else besides the kernel out there.
There is a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, tiny.
Yeah. So, any questions for?
Yeah.
Bruce Benson raised his hand.
Okay, Bruce.
Thanks. I saw a slide where it said things were going to CS9, and I went back to the build page. And will I be able to take the CentOS Stream 8 instructions and then paste in a URL that works for 9, and it will work? Like I've got a CS9 machine. I could, or do the docs need to be changed? Yeah.
No, you'll need to look at the Rail host. So it's the, oh yeah, I see what you mean. The installing OS build part has something that's specific to CentOS Stream 8. That thing is not specific to CentOS Stream 9. You can use the Rail command, and that will work. That will work fine. It's just that for some reason the DNF plugin on CentOS Stream 8 is confused between Apple 8 and CentOS Stream 8. That is not a problem that exists in CentOS Stream 9, as there is no CentOS Linux 9, so that problem is actually going away there. So you can just use the Fedora or the Rail host commands. They will work. They will work fine. I'll adjust the document to say though.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. Any other comments, questions? If not, we'll move on to goals from the previous meeting and the previous year. All right. So last year, this was the slide I think that was up from December, just to continue building infrastructure, which it sounds like a lot of work has been done on that, to find a better time to meet, which has not been accomplished, and to encourage all interested parties to join this community, which I have noticed around that there has been more discussion about the CentOS SIG and more interest. And I know that a lot of people will be watching this recording because of the previous issue, that finding a better time to meet is actually really a challenge. But yeah, let's go through some of the goals that we actually had in 2021. We started this SIG in September. I believe our first official meeting was in September. So it really is only about 4 months old. And in that time, I think we have done quite a lot to build a foundational community, to establish working relationships among all of the participants as much as we possibly can. And of course, we've been encouraging others to join. We are still in the process of creating documentation around the community, so I put an X there to make sure that we noticed that we still need to do that, including some detailed contribution guidelines. Pierre and team have built, obviously, we were just looking at some of the great documentation that exists already. Want to make sure that we get our community guidelines down, and make it as welcoming a place to join as possible, and also to get a contributing file into the repo itself, because that's kind of a standard in open source. We have been developing plans for the automotive variant. Clearly, there are plans that are in code and in the repo now. There is build and test infrastructure. We're working on a CI pipeline. I think that it's all going extremely well and very quickly. And we did do some presentations at Automotive Linux Summit. Gabrielle actually did a talk about our functional safety methodology, which was great. It was a follow-on from the talk, a similar talk he gave the previous month at the ELISA workshop. And then it was supposed to be it was supposed to be Gabrielle and myself giving a functional safety BOF. And since I was out sick, it ended up just being Gabrielle. But evidently there were 29 people there at the Automotive Linux Summit BOF for functional safety, and it was all going well. One thing that was unfortunate is that we did not actually end up having stickers, which I think we will try to remedy this year, because that was brought up as a bug last year, and I want to make sure that we don't lose track of it.
This is your John F. Kennedy moment, Jeffro. This SIG should commit itself before this year is out.
Yeah. I'm not sure that's exactly the path that I want to trace as the chair, but I'll let that one go. So things are going quite well. This is basically a wall of text. I might split it into two at some point. Goals and questions. So these are some questions that I have for the group. I don't remember how many people we have on, 20 something. We have 23 people on, it looks like. And so these are the goals that I've written down. This is definitely not a list that is set in stone. I am taking notes, and I would like to hear from other people about what we would like to do. I think that we do need a contributing file in the repo, as I had said. I think we need to make sure that the repo follows all of the best open source guidelines and is as open and welcoming as possible. I think we've certainly, the CI pipeline is going to do a great job with that, and the available images are going to be very popular, I think. I think we need to do some documentation work and develop pages on the wiki. That would be the CentOS wiki, And one of the things that we've talked about in previous meetings is creating a page so that people can post hardware ideas. Right now, we are really using the Raspberry Pi 4 only because it is ubiquitous and readily available, or it would be if it weren't for the chip shortage. We want to have one basic configuration and no BSPs. I remember writing that one down. We want to have supporting pages for other hardware so that it is an easy process to get this this operating system running on alternative hardware. And the other question I had about the wiki is, should we be listing the technical leads for the SIG? I think that I'm listed as the acting chair. One other thing that I wanted to do also is ask, and we'll talk about it in a second, is do we want to elect a new chair? It is largely an administrative role. I don't have any problem running the meetings and setting up times and such, but I wanted to give other people the opportunity if possible. But I know that Pierre has been doing a great job, and I wanted to make sure that he gets some recognition, but also I wanted to make sure that people know where they can go for problems and questions and things. Feel free to jump in anytime too. I'm basically just kind of going over these things one by one. One thing that I had forgotten to add on this also is there has been a request to start a synchronous discussion channel other than IRC. And so I've been exploring the possibility of using either Matrix or Discourse. And if people have opinions on that, I'd be glad to hear. There are some challenges with each of those, particularly in terms of creating a bridge back to IRC so that people can continue to use IRC. Our IRC channel is not very active, and so I don't think it would be a huge problem to wander away from it. But I would love to take some information about that. One of the benefits of Matrix is that it already exists, and that there is another CentOS SIG that is using it. The CentOS Hyperscale SIG has a presence on Matrix. One of the big benefits of Discourse is that it's a very robust platform, and that we might very well be able to join on to into Fedora's channel for now, and then eventually split off into our own CentOS channel. I heard bleep. I'm not watching the chat, but I should be. Is there a hand that went up? Clark.
Clark, go ahead.
You're saying discourse, not Discord? Is that
Correct.
right?
Yes.
I was just learning that myself.
That's a new one for me. So once
Okay.
again, a
Discourse is-
new way to communicate has been created.
Discourse is
Okay.
basically a web form. Just think of it as discourse as a web form.
Thank you. I mean, I know what the word means. I was just
Yeah, but the tool discourse is a web forum. It isn't this. It is meant for
not necessarily mobile, more desktop-ish.
like you can use it on the there's a web app, there's a phone app. What I mean by web form is that it is not real-time communication in a channel.
Well, if it's not real time, I can't use it.
Yeah, this is a forum.
This is a forum.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, forums look.
Clark only does
Okay.
real time.
I have an opinion about forum. Keep going.
Don't
Well,
be
no,
shy. We
Funny
remember
here.
Clark said earlier.
So
don't be
I've already
shy.
created alt.centos automotive in an NTP. Can we move everything over to that? I would use a Yahoo channel, but they've
They're harder to get to these days.
Can we create a bulletin board?
So one of the purposes for this was to enable the ability to share code snippets, and I don't know how easy that is in certainly not very easy in IRC. Matrix is it makes it possible, but I believe it's a little bit painful. Somebody with more experience can.
no, it's just MD5 or a markdown. You just do a markdown
Okay.
share, and it just plobs a blob. You don't want that on IRC though, because what you get is on the IRC experience is anything over 3 or 4 lines is
That's truncated.
well, it's a link to
Mhm.
a
Oh, really?
image.
The other option is that we could do both. I mean, as long as the cost works out, which at the moment both of them happen to have zero cost, then we could do both. I just don't want to end up with little, islands of discussion here and
Well,
there.
I mean, the issue is I think we are going to end up with islands of discussion.
Yeah.
Some of us aren't going to. I have a Discourse account, but I never am on it.
Hmm.
The Matrix IRC is useful for me, but it is also not zero cost. Let us be clear here.
Right. No, zero cost.
Red Hat is paying for this
Mhm.
for both the services. It's just coming out of a different pool that we might, if we were to use it a lot, might need to also chip in on.
That's true. That's true. We are so far away from being in that position that I wasn't quite on.
Yeah.
It is something to consider. Ian.
Was not to broach a sensitive subject here, but is the concern that IRC is not really the most accessible? That even with Matrix, that we're missing out on an opportunity to have a more broadly accessible chat platform? Was that the reason for? Okay. Yeah. This has come up in other contexts.
Well, what has been mentioned to me is accessibility, some concerns about security, which I didn't quite follow, and the ability to share code snippets. They basically want something that's more feature driven than IRC.
Yeah.
Not just a discussion.
Got it. Yeah, and then the challenge becomes which of the plethora of options is more likely, because there's a lot of fragmentation there.
Yeah.
Are most people using Element for their Matrix client, or is there I guess I was just soliciting alternatives.
My experience is limited to Element.
Okay.
I use either Element or the web client. You can also, there's a program called Neon. There's a couple. Nico Chat is what it is.
I believe you can use Pigeon as well. Pigeon.
Quite likely, the Pigeon experience though is like everything else.
That one, I think you can still connect to Yahoo channels. At least it still has the ability, or the API is still there. So, for completion, one thing that has come up in discussion is Slack, and Slack is both. Slack is problematic in a number of ways. We're not really using that as a viable option.
Jeffro, does it make sense to sort of? I don't think we'll make a decision in the moment here, but I think it's also important if we feel like this is a way that we might get some broader interest and be more accessible. Maybe we should have a working group and just say, let's decide on something. And then I think whatever it is, we should throw our weight behind it. We should say this, we're camping here, and rah, please come.
Okay. Well, one thing that I can say that I've heard in this discussion so far is a strong interest in Matrix and a zero interest in having a web forum on Discourse. Does that sound? Is that what everybody else has heard?
That's it. Yeah, to the extent there's any consensus view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think that people see the value of a web forum over email lists.
Yeah, the web forum is useful if you have an active community who are going to be using it. The issue is we don't have an active community.
We don't. That is true.
And we could actually end up with having too many forum windows to where people are. I've seen this with the in another environment that we have accidentally started up, where everybody tried to come up with tried to meet everybody everywhere by having tons of different forums, so that and the problem is you end up with very little traffic on all of them because everybody's dancing around trying to find the best one, and none of them meet that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Rich has pointed out also that Discourse does have a traditional mailing list interface.
Yeah, I would say that's like saying that you could also have a program that sends IRC to email once a day. I have not found it very useful. It garbages it the stuff I have to deal with on code wise. But for other communication, it probably works fine. But the part that we were looking for, which was that we wanted to be able to share code snippets and such, I've not had good luck with it.
Right. Okay. Clark, to answer your question, we don't actually have a matrix channel yet. The Hyperscale SIG does have a matrix channel, and they've been working out the bugs with things like a bridge over to IRC.
Okay.
As soon as they
Sorry,
get that working.
I guess I missed that because I was feeling very frustrated that I couldn't find anything, and now I feel much better that my skills aren't.
No, we're
rusty.
We're actually trying to make a decision before jumping, as opposed to
I see.
the ready jump set type of thing. So
the Red Hat way, you mean?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's limited. So anyway,
culture thing.
We didn't invent that.
No.
Yeah,
I know.
Not invented here. I think that we'll probably end up with a matrix channel, and we'll try to get that set up before the next meeting. Say, maybe before.
I would suggest we try it.
Yeah.
And just, I mean, no one here has said, Discourse is better than Matrix or vice versa. Let's just pick one, see if we can get some discussion going. And if it doesn't work out, move.
Nobody has also, I really am desperate to stay with IRC.
You know, I got my IRC channels, and I never use them on my phone, which is kind of a detriment that sometimes I'm away. Of course, it's sometimes good that some of those kernel.org guys can't get a hold of me. So I would say let's do something modern. I don't think we need to propagate IRC, even though I like it.
The other
I
thing is
agree.
that we've been having an IRC channel for quite a while now, and there is about zero traffic outside of people coming in and out. So at this point, I would think that IRC just doesn't seem to be doing what we want to do. So let's pick another thing and see if it works better.
I think part of that was that kerfuffle that went on about ownership of the hosts and all that upstream and everybody moving.
No, it has to do because this is going to be a low traffic channel. This is not a
You're saying we're not mainstream, Stephen?
Yeah. We're alternative. And
we all get a tattoo.
We're going to have the communication in a channel is two-way. There has to be people communicating for a reason there. And there hasn't been any real reason to communicate here. Our fixes and patches get done elsewhere. There hasn't been a widespread product that people could try out or a use case, and that kind of cuts down the need to have any communication because there's not a lot of, well, I had a problem getting this to work on my Raspberry Pi, or I'm trying to put this in my Ford F50 and it's crashing at this point. How do I fix it?
Synchronous communication tends to also be question and answer. So it usually is people who are having difficulty with the artifacts that exist, as opposed to having difficulty creating those artifacts. I find those tend to be either happening in tickets or on the mailing list, as they are now. So
Well, it'll be a faster communication channel once we start to have multiple folks working on similar systems,
mhm,
and you have to make decisions. What are we going to name this? What APIs do we need? I don't like your API. I want you to use my API. So let's
mhm,
have a fight. I mean, the typical developer discussion, and
mhm.
and I think a synchronous channel can facilitate a lot of that.
And also with the proliferation of other kinds of initiatives around the industry.
Yeah.
I see there's somebody coming in asking questions about how we relate to Sophie, for example, or how we relate to the Eclipse software defined vehicle edge project.
Yeah.
Um, I actually have a bullet point on that a little bit later here. So so that yeah, those questions might crop up in a synchronous channel rather than on a mailing list. So related to this, one of the other ideas that came up at the end of last year was the idea of a board farm with remote access. Um, is that something that is still on people's minds, or are we thinking that people will be having Raspberry Pis on their desk? What would we want to see supported, and more importantly, how do we think we might be able to fund such a thing? And I guess this is more of a general question rather than a goal. I would like to find out whether this is going to be a goal for 2022.
I think this actually came up in the December meeting a little bit,
Did it?
and yeah, and it seems a great idea. I think the feedback in December was the nature of the reference hardware in this space makes it less likely that other than a handful of well-known, truly publicly available things like the Raspberry Pi, and NVIDIA has relatively easily acquired reference platforms for some of their IoT stuff, which is also the foundation for some of their automotive work. Bruce Benson, thank you. Gosh. That this is worth trying, but we shouldn't really count on this, that a lot of hardware in the space is relatively tightly controlled. So the notion of having a public board farm is not, we could certainly try and change hearts and minds, and that would be wonderful. But
It's really useful for generic parts of the framework, like ensuring that the kernel you've got is doing what it's supposed to do, is it's interfacing properly with the system D and services up in user space. But it gets really cost prohibitive and labor intensive when you start doing things like saying, let's add in this particular GPU that we can use for a neural net, for onboard ADAS calculations. So I would love to see us have a board farm so that we could do things like CI. And if we could get the right mix of devices in there, it's very nice for somebody who doesn't have access to a Qualcomm Snapdragon or an NXP board or something like that to be able to say, oh, let me reserve that,
Hmm.
provision it, you know, run my application, find out what's breaking, and then release it back. But it's expensive.
Hmm.
I mean, and you're not going to be able to get away with a part-time maintainer. I think you're probably going to have to say we need somebody that runs this board farm. At least if it starts to get used, if it sits there and withers, then you know.
I'm gonna.
Then you still need somebody to turn it off.
Good point. Good point.
Is there a place it can live?
There was, but not anymore.
I'm going to propose that maybe this is this question is a little bit preliminary for this particular project. That it's not something that is maybe something we can address down the road, but it isn't something that is a hot topic for right now. And I will go back and I hope. Do you happen to know if the December meeting was recorded? I will. I think it was probably automatically recorded. I will take a look. Let's see.
Say if it was, you would be in the best position to know because I think it was your meeting, so it would have
I think
drop
it was.
in your
Okay.
inbox. I
Okay.
understand it would not have been top of mind for you at the time. So.
Right. Yeah, I will go back and take a look. Okay.
Can we go back to electing a new chair?
Yeah.
'Cause I would say we should by acclaim appoint you, chair for life.
You're assuming that I want the job for life.
This is being drafted,
Oh, okay.
for the good of the community.
I'm being told about this, am I?
Well, I guess what I'm saying is let's go a little further until we have a solid community.
Okay.
I think you're doing a fine job. I don't know what anybody else thinks, but
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Like I said, it's mostly an administrative role at this point. We're not really making any humongous decisions on behalf of the community yet. And really, it's the bulk of the work is being done by Pierre and his team. I just get credit. I'm the one who runs the meeting. Yes, Bruce.
Bruce, are you trying to follow Robert's rules of order here?
It's like, indeed.
I'd like to second Clark's motion.
Yeah. I'd like to motion that I'm able to speak.
Point of order. Go ahead. Right.
I wanted to use this as Bruce learns about the incubation of open source projects to be part of a CentOS SIG. Does CentOS want this to grow and have like, I'm going to say scary stuff like bylaws and succession and stuff like that, almost like it's incorporated to shepherd any, to provide assurance that source code is shepherded along through some kind of life, or it would maybe automatically subsume under all of the things that CentOS. I'm not saying anything is or isn't being done. I just wanted to use this to learn what you guys think of the growth trajectory of it organizationally and structurally.
The CentOS project does not expect SIGs to have their own bylaws. The CentOS project does expect SIGs to abide by the overarching CentOS code of conduct and existing bylaws, which are fairly minimal, but beyond that, we just want you to be functional and play nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you, Rich. I was thinking from the like code contribution stuff. Okay. Yeah, and I'm not a big bylaws kind of guy. I like, even though I raised my hand, I'm more of a Wild West character.
No, I mean, maybe Bruce, when you started asking this, I would say like a SIG is a much more low key thing than say a consortium or a foundation. It's meant to, and my understanding, by the way, is ours is among the more rigorously run already in this space. Rich is nodding vigorously.
That's correct.
We're already engaging in SIG best practices.
Yeah, Ian, keep Bruce talking while I get the sergeant at arms to come and remove him.
Yeah. So
that answer really kind of captured the je ne sais quoi of what I was trying to ask. Thank you.
Okay. I guess we'll just move on to the next one here. One of the things that I find myself tasked with is also as the community architect for Red Hat, I tend to have a lot of high touch with internal initiatives like Sophie and the Eclipse Software Defined Edge project and a number of other initiatives around the industry. I make mention of the CentOS SIG wherever it's so. but one thing that I would like to know is how closely does this want to follow those, and vice versa? Are we hopeful that, for example, Sophie will be aware of our CentOS SIG? Maybe nobody. This may be. I may be talking to nobody here. I'm not sure anybody has an opinion about it. But the Eclipse Software Defined Edge project, in particular, I think there's opportunity there for our eventual architecture to follow the architecture by the group, and that we can that process and vice versa.
I'm glad you brought that up. I ran across the Eclipse stuff, and there seemed some, I got the vibe there was something synergistic there, and I didn't have time to look into it deeper. And I've enjoyed using some Eclipse products at a deep level. Not that that directly relates to a foundation project. So I thought it was interesting that you brought it up.
Yeah, you can get a clue about how Eclipse runs open source initiatives by having with the IDE, for example. But it has grown to be quite a bit larger than just the IDE. They're similar to the Linux Foundation in that they host initiatives based on specific things. There's a link for it. And since Red Hat is involved with and has a number of other things on the radar, even if we aren't directly involved, Red Hat is. I just wondered how much feedback we should for CentOS with these.
I get when I look at Eclipse, I can kind of paint a sketch in my mind of, there's a pattern fly UI where you kind of like the cockpit OS tree builder thing, and then something to slurp up code like microshift perhaps. And then since we do projects that use Che, you could have an IDE pop up, and then you have like, here's the target, push the button, poof, it shoots it into the board, and off they go. So there seem to be synergistic elements. So it does seem interesting to track these guys.
Okay. Well, I can make sure to kind of mention in these formal meetings what I have seen going on publicly in the Software Defined Edge project, and maybe vice versa. Create a link there. Okay. And then, of course, the larger question is, what do we want to see in 2022 from this group? We've got about 12 minutes left.
I'll throw out there something that, this is either at the risk of stating the obvious or exciting news. I don't know how it will land for everybody. I think we're going to put more emphasis on Red Hat's contribution to the SIG, providing something that looks more and more like the sort of upstream version of the automotive OS product. So we've started some tentative steps in that direction in terms of where they differ, that Clark and Francisco and other members of the kernel effort associated with our program are working on. So, and a big part of that will be essentially trying to mirror some of the stream-like workflow that occurs with RHEL for anything that is associated with the Red Hat automotive product. I emphasize again, this is Red Hat's contribution to this, or the first thing that Red Hat wants to do sort of publicly and share with the SIG. It isn't the primary purpose. Further to the point we were making with Bruce earlier, these are kind of very open-ended, low-key groups in the SIG. So, other things, there could be initiatives to sort of facilitate hardware enablement. There could be work on, larger frameworks. I'm not entirely sure, but we're certainly, I guess I'm just announcing that you'll see more and more some efforts to sort of formalize how we have an upstream for the in-vehicle OS product. Very much inspired by how CentOS Stream works for RHEL. So
And I think that's definitely speaks to the transparency effort that Red Hat. It's one of Red Hat's fundamental values. I would love, personally, I would love to see contributions and interest from groups outside of Red Hat as well. The intention for this SIG has been to do this within CentOS as a public base, as opposed to being just an upstream for Red Hat. And so I would love to see that. I would love to see us bring in, maybe mirror some code, or be a sort of collecting repository for enabling software like middleware. That if I mean, just to throw out an example, I would love to see like ROS support, or that will be relevant to a feature later on. ROS is most relevant right now to automated driving and assisted driving, but it's a very robust community. It's a great operating system. It's a great set of middleware, and I would love to see us support it to some degree. And it's just one example. I think there's a lot of different examples of things that we could support. So, anybody from outside Red Hat, if you have any ideas about what you'd like to see from this group, we'd be glad to hear from you.
If
we
we
really
could
want to make this
have,
not just a Red Hat product.
this is Philip talking, if we could have a kernel that boot in less than 2 seconds with security enabled, that would be cool.
Yeah, I think we all want that. And their thoughts on it.
Thrown down.
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I stepped on somebody.
I just said.
So that was.
Go ahead.
1 second. This was the challenge that was put to it. Did I hear that right?
Thank you,
No,
Ian.
in the automotive sector, they say 2 seconds, but to be honest, if you boot in less than 5, they're going to be happy.
Okay.
Yeah. How soon do you want a camera up?
The camera has to be up in less than 2 seconds. That's the regulation, but normally it does not run on Linux. It runs on a lower level. So.
Yeah, no, I think that would be. We've seen that there have been various efforts at this. It's usually something that someone really ruminates on it for quite some time and shares what they've done. There's not a lot of commonality in it. So like rapid boot, saying that the automotive kernel, which is the first thing that we've really surfaced as a unique artifact, the first thing to work on that would be to, we don't need to brandish individual numbers about how quickly, but just sort of characterizing it and getting some collaboration on that effort would be neat. It's fairly hardware specific is one of the challenges of that, but we have some hardware.
It's also fairly firmware specific. I mean, that's
right.
Yeah. I mean, that the current challenge we're having is it's 800 milliseconds before we get to the kernel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's not on the Raspberry Pi, by the way. I don't know what the current Pi numbers are, but so suddenly we're down to 1.2 seconds to have the kernel functional and user space running and drivers initialized and the camera producing frames and the LCD displaying them. So, I mean, it's a challenge. I'm not saying we can't do it, but I kind of suspect, at least in early days, we're going to be cooperating a lot closer with firmware than we're used to.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway.
Yeah, but Clark, don't you think accepting that as a given is that we can only speed up the things that we can speed up as the Linux community? There's some interesting to try and gather some of the efforts that have happened there,
and we're doing things like we're looking at things like trying to parallelize initialization. I mean, we do have this cool facility of kernel threads that we could kick off because we have multiple cores and do device initializations, but then there's a rendezvous problem you have to deal with and a dependency problem. So, but I think it's all good, and I would love to see the SIG dive deep into that to say how can we restructure things. And the other side of it is it would probably be a very nice add upstream if we could come up with a good solution.
Yeah.
You know, the Linux community would not hate us if we said, here, let's speed up boot by 200%.
Yeah. One thing I just noted in the chat is maybe this would be an opportunity for us to have a working group within the SIG specifically about fast boot.
Well, everybody wants it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that might.
Yeah,
Well,
everybody.
it would be a good shingle to hang out there. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah.
No, clearly everybody wants that, but we have to be careful that, as it was said before, some people have done proof of concept, but mostly with security disabled. And
Right.
as today with the new cybersecurity regulation coming in, it has to handle the security as well. And for example, just having a nice configuration with the root partition in read-only and all that stuff is very specific to the embedded space, but it's very, very important. So I agree, it's closely related to the kernel. It has a lot of dependency on the hardware, but there are also stuff that are fully generic, but that are today not nicely handled by standard distribution. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's not just that we all want it; we have to have it.
Mm-hmm.
You know that it is a regulatory issue that the backup camera has to be on in less than 2 seconds. So I'm all for saying let's try and put together.
And cybersecurity regulation is mandatory from June of this year for any
Which
new
one?
platform. The 155 and 156 for US, United Nations. Yeah.
What, I don't know what 155 means. I'm sorry.
It's, more or less they all say the same thing. You have to look for all your assets. You have to describe how your asset can be attacked, and you have to describe how you're going to remediate if one of your assets is attacked. More or less, they all have, this general idea in mind, and you need an external authority to say, yes, you've done the work that you should have done, so it's okay to go on the road. But it's a big thread in the automotive sector today, not only in the automotive, but especially in the automotive sector. And it's going to be mandatory from June in US and from December in Europe and December in Japan.
So this is not a functional safety. This is a security.
This is a security issue. Yeah, cybersecurity.
Yeah. A regulatory issue.
Yeah. The reason I asked is because I reviewed the draft of the cyber for automotive from ISO, and there were a lot. I am a former information security auditor, and I'm an embedded practitioner. So I try to stay abreast of these things. So if you've got something on the horizon, I'd love to hear it. Is where I'm going with that. But what I'd seen so far had a pretty standardized kind of thing, and the automotive specific stuff seemed like it was still evolving.
So this is I just passed the pointer on the 155, and 156 is just attached to that one, but it's like the follow-up. And you have the equivalents for US and Japan, more or less.
UN regulation 155.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah. So that's a big threat today, and so whatever we do, we have to take that in account. Otherwise, we're not going to go on the road. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think we should definitely build this into our plans and address it in documentation. Take a note to do so. It is also at the top of the hour here, and the only thing we didn't get to is a future meeting schedule, but that's kind of a perpetual issue within this SIG. What I'm going to do maybe is set up the next meeting in this same time space as an office hour, so we can just kind of come and do a general discussion. And we'll do that in 2 to 3 weeks. So thank you all for coming, and thank you for this very, very interesting stuff here. I'm going to post this. I will make these slides available, obviously. Come on. It's not doing the right thing. Anyway, the slides will be available after this, as well as the recording. And yeah, I think that's it for this meeting.
Thanks, Jeffro.
I appreciate it all. Thank you all for coming.
See you guys.
Talk to you soon.
Thank you all.